Genuinely, this is one of my favourite books on Chinese martial arts. I loved reading it to do this video for you. Let's get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. My name is Matt. If you're new here, I do videos about Chinese martial arts. This week we're talking about one of my absolute favourites. It's a classic, you've probably read it. Chinese Boxing, Masters and Methods. It's a great book. I really enjoyed having to read it to do this video. I say having to read it, I just read it, it was great. So let's talk about why it's so good. If you haven't read it, then now hopefully I will inspire you from watching this video. And if you have read it, well, let's talk about our favourite bits. If you have read it as well, hit me up down in the comments below, let me know who your favourite master was. Okay, so the key thing is there are going to be no spoilers in this video. I mean, there's not much to spoil, but it's just a really, really cool book. So who's Robert W. Smith? He's an American who back in the 60s got sent to Taiwan for work and then had a background in doing judo and wanted to learn some Chinese martial arts whilst he was in Taiwan. He was there for 3 years, but in that 3 years, he tried to pack it in and met as many masters as he could. It's a really interesting book as well because the way he writes, firstly, it's got that kind of old gentleman kind of way of writing, a slightly old-fashioned thing, which is quite charming. But also there's this like travel log element to it where it's talking about not simply a list of the masters and their styles, it's sort of how he gets introduced to them. So he leaves one master and they try and come back after him to get him back as a student. I also like the fact that he's clearly thinking critically about the masters he meets and the arts that they teach. To a degree criticises some of the techniques or whatever of the masters. And I think that's quite good. It gives me more faith in his experience, opposed to simply having this romantic view of Kung Fu, of it all being fantastic. So he's clearly thinking about things and whether it works as a martial art, opposed to simply just pretty forms, which I think is really cool. And I like that goes all the way through the book about his meetings with different masters. So interestingly, in the book, he even complains about the endless forms that get done and them having no application without any understanding. And I thought that was quite interesting, sort of ahead of his time in some ways. Let me just read a quick quote for you. He's actually quoting someone else, but he's talking about this idea of people just going through forms without having any idea of what they're doing. So the quote is from Struthers Burt, but he's put it in his book. The human soul cannot function if the pipes are clogged by the refuse of antiquity. Cutting. So I love that in the book, it really feels like you go on a journey with him as well, in that he's being introduced to all these different people and he's talking about not only the masters that he's trained with, but people he's met in passing and a little bit about their style. The book has got loads of different styles in it, so we've got different Tai Chi, Bagua, Xingyi. There's reference to Shaolin arts, different White Crane masters. Towards the back there's quite a few bits on different types of White Crane master. None of it appears to be Yong Chun White Crane, it's more of like the Fujian later cranes. You've got all these different styles, and then amongst that as well, he also meets these masters where they don't seem to have like a named style as such. He just talks about their method. The book really makes you feel like you're there and you're in this world going through it with him. He goes into lots of details, not about just the training, but some of the quirks of the masters and things like that. Something that is interesting though is he includes lots of other stories that aren't necessarily something he's directly experienced, but about some stories heard of a master who did X, Y, or Z. So a lot of it you do have to take with a pinch of salt for those sorts of old stories. Part of the joy is it does have this sort of romantic element of old Kung Fu. It's not simply just a book about a series of exercises, it's the world and the culture, and you get transported back there with the author. That's what makes it endlessly rereadable, because you sort of like you're stepping back in time. So I read you this quote that I like, and let me tell you about it afterwards. So, Chang's grandfather was an expert in dog boxing, Gou Quan, in which the opponent is pulled to the ground, scissored and kicked. Cheng told me that the only way to fight a dog boxer is to stay clear of him and throw things at him. Above all, never close with him. That just makes me laugh so much. So let me explain why. When I first read that years and years ago, I thought like throwing punches, you've got to throw punches at this dog boxer on the ground. But now I know from having done years of dog boxing, the fact that to get that close, they'd be trying to sweep you and kick you in the face and everything else. They literally mean throw things at him. Every time I read the book, it just takes me back to my youth. So the book is heavily weighted towards internal styles, I would say. There's loads of talk of like Xingyi Bagua and different types of Tai Chi. What's interesting about even that is the fact that it says that it covers the different methods of different teachers as well, obviously masters and methods, but it does, I'd say, sort of look down to a degree on the external styles. I'll do a video about that later, but it does look down on the what are commonly called external styles of sort of Shaolin and other things like that, which I think does it a disservice. That might just be because those are the masters who were in Taiwan at the time, or those are the circles he was moving in. He starts off with a Xingyi master, so clearly he's going to get more introduced to those types of people opposed to others doing hard styles. But that aside, it's a great book and it's just a really, really enjoyable read. It mentions quite a few times some martial artists from Fujian. So obviously Fujian, for those who don't know, is the province in mainland China right next to Taiwan. And as a student of different styles of Fujian Kung Fu, it doesn't actually have many of the styles you would think of. It has lots of different cranes, but they all seem to be the later types of cranes that you get around Fuzhou, so like the Ming He Chuan, that kind of stuff. And it certainly doesn't have any of the like Yong Chun White Crane or even Yong Tai Tiger Boxing or Dog Boxing or anything else like that. It mentions bits of wrestling and grappling and stuff like that, but the heavy weight in the book is towards those internal styles. Regardless, it was fascinating. I really enjoyed reading the book. I loved the fact that I had to read it again for this video, and I really recommend, if you haven't read it, that you read it again. If you've read it, why not read it again? Relive your youth. Let me know in the comments below what your favourite bit of the book is. And let me read you this quote that I think sums up learning Chinese martial arts in a really wonderful way. After an evening with Wang, despite my weariness, I would return home late in a condition that the Spanish called joyous, but for quite another reason. I spent an intoxicating evening learning in the company of fine friends. And that's what it's all about. I hope you've enjoyed this week's video. Here's a video where I talk about how to further immerse yourself in Tai Chi and Kung Fu by learning some Chinese, and a couple of stories about some trips to China I think you'll find cool. You could do me a favour and hit subscribe, that'd be awesome. I'll see you guys in the next video.